I was 16 years old when it all happened. We lived in a quiet, almost forgettable suburban town in northern Ohio. You know, the kind of place where nothing really ever happens, and you recognize your neighbors more by their cars than their faces. It was a crisp Friday night in early October. The air cold enough to fog up the windows whenever the heater decided to kick on. For the first time ever, my parents were out of town for the night, leaving me home alone. To stave off the inevitable mix of boredom and creeping nervousness, I invited my best friend, Evan, over. He lived just a few houses down the street. We spent the first few hours doing exactly what you'd expect: demolishing bags of junk food, mashing buttons on video game controllers, and having those deep, yet completely nonsensical conversations that only teenagers can have. But as the clock ticked past midnight, the house started to feel different. The usual comforting silence was replaced by a kind of oppressive quiet. The glow from the TV, which was usually a source of comfort, now just seemed to cast long, unsettling shadows across the living room. It was Evan who broke the silence. He turned to me and, with a slight grin, suggested we play hide and seek. At first, it sounded ridiculously childish. We were 16, not 6, but the more we talked about it, the more the idea grew on us. It felt like a genuinely good way to break the monotony and fill the empty spaces of the house with something other than our own anxieties. We set up some simple ground rules to keep things from getting too complicated or dangerous. We'd keep the lights off, except for a single small lamp in the kitchen, just enough to prevent us from tripping over everything. No one was allowed to go outside, into the attic, or into the creepy crawl spaces under the house. Everything else was fair game. Evan decided he'd hide first. I stood in the hallway, faced the wall, and started counting to 100. As the numbers climbed, I could hear him scrambling around the house, the frantic thud of his feet on the hardwood floors, the creak and slam of doors opening and closing. Then, suddenly, complete and total silence. It was a heavy, unnerving kind of silence, thicker and more absolute than it should have been. I finished my count, took a deep breath, and started my search. The house felt enormous. In the dark, every creak of the floorboards under my own feet sounded like an explosion. I checked all the obvious spots first. Behind the couch, in the downstairs coat closet, under the dining room table. Nothing. I made my way upstairs, my heart starting to beat a little faster. The shadows upstairs seemed to play tricks on my eyes, making familiar shapes look foreign and menacing. I checked my parents' room, the bathroom, and then finally, I crept toward the guest room at the end of the hall. I knew this had to be it. I could almost feel him in there. After finding him, it was my turn to hide. I wanted a spot that was clever, one he wouldn't check right away. I ran upstairs to the same guest room and, without a second thought, slid under the bed. It was dusty and cramped, but I managed to pull the long dust ruffle down, completely concealing myself. From my hiding spot, I had a perfect, albeit limited, view of the bottom of the door and the floor. The silence returned, and I held my breath, listening for any sign of Evan. Soon, I heard his footsteps moving through the house downstairs. They were slow, deliberate. This wasn't the sound of someone frantically searching. It was the sound of someone hunting. The steps came up the stairs, one by one, each one echoing through the house and making my heart pound in my chest. He checked the other rooms first, and then his footsteps stopped right outside the guest room door. The doorknob turned slowly, and the door creaked open. I saw his sneakers step into the room. He walked over and stopped directly beside the bed where I was hiding. I could hear him breathing. It was a steady, calm rhythm. I braced myself, waiting for him to drop to his knees and yell, "Found you," but he didn't. He just stood there, motionless. For what felt like an eternity, he just stood there, listening. It was the most terrifying moment of the game. It felt like he knew I was there, like he was playing a psychological game with me. After several long, agonizing minutes, he turned and walked out of the room, closing the door softly behind him. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. A few minutes later, he called out that he was giving up. We met back in the living room, and I immediately started teasing him about how he was standing right next to me, but he wasn't laughing. He looked genuinely spooked. He swore that while he was searching, he heard someone else moving around upstairs. He said it sounded like quiet, shuffling footsteps in one of the other bedrooms, which is why he was moving so slowly and cautiously. I accused him of just trying to scare me, trying to win the argument by making up a story. We went back and forth, our voices getting a little louder, the tension of the game spilling over into a real argument. And that's when we heard it. A distinct, unmistakable click of the front door opening and then closing. We both froze there, our argument dying in our throats. We looked at each other, eyes wide with a terror that was no longer part of any game. Then we heard the footsteps. They were slow, careful, and heavy. Far too heavy to be Evan, and certainly not me. They moved with a chilling confidence, an unfamiliar rhythm that didn't belong in my house. We didn't even have to speak. We bolted, scrambling up the stairs and into my bedroom, locking the door behind us. We dove into my closet, pulling the doors shut, huddling together in the darkness, every muscle in our bodies tensed. We held our breath, straining to hear. The footsteps moved through the downstairs area. A pause in the living room. Then, the kitchen. We could hear the faint creak of a floorboard, the soft scrape of a chair. It was the sound of someone exploring, methodically moving through rooms. We weren't in. The minutes stretched into an eternity. We stayed hidden, not daring to make a sound, until the house fell completely silent once again. After what must have been half an hour, I finally got up the courage to grab my phone and dial 911, whispering our location to the operator. The police arrived quickly, their presence flooding the house with a sense of safety we hadn't felt in hours. They searched every inch of the house, from top to bottom. They found nothing. There was no sign of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was even out of place. They were kind. But their conclusion was clear. It was just our nerves getting the better of us. An old house making strange noises. An overactive imagination fueled by a scary game in the dark. They suggested we just try to get some sleep. But sleep was impossible. For weeks, I lay awake at night, jumping at every creak and groan of the house. Every shadow seemed to hold a figure, and every sound felt too close. And that's when the truly terrifying realization hit me. The police were wrong. Someone was in the house that night, and whoever it was, they knew how to move without making a sound. They knew how to be quiet. And as I replayed the events over and over in my head, I understood the most chilling part of all. When Evan was searching for me, and I was hiding under the bed, the person he heard moving in the other room wasn't his imagination. And when I was hiding, and those footsteps stopped right beside me, ... they weren't his. Whoever was in our house knew we were playing a game, and they knew exactly where we were hiding. Years before all of this, there was a local legend in our town. Kids used to play hide-and-seek near the dense tree line that bordered the back of our neighborhood. It was a common story, one you'd dismiss as a typical campfire tale. But several different people, over many years, reported the same strange thing. While they were playing, they would hear extra footsteps in the woods, running and rustling through the leaves, sounds that didn't match any of the kids who were actually playing the game. You never truly know who or what might be seeking. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Stay safe out there.